Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I am Niti, and we are live here from the Food Church on North Carolina. If you've missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and then watch the rest like a documentary. We are a people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel, but we're shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you, and we're sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section, so be kind and self-govern. And if you have any questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air today with Hudson Roberts, who is the co-coordinator on Idaho. So welcome, Hudson. How are you today?
I'm good, Niti. Thanks for having me on again. I always enjoy these conversations.
I appreciate you making the time. And I mean, this is just a really important series of topics. And I look very forward to presenting this to everyone with you. I appreciate your time and helping us call all men. Bring everybody to the forefront, because we need not just all men, but we need all the young men. And Hudson, I really value, your contribution, and I feel that it is, you're here for this time. And I think it's really important for everyone to be able to really listen and get to know. And you and I started a couple weeks ago this conversation about the generational gap, I guess, is the best way to summarize that. What do you think?
Yeah. So I remember last time we were talking a little bit about something that I had mentioned on my podcast, just about how the older generation tends to be more capable of self-governance, but most of the time they've already built their lives on the lie, right? The great fraud, to the point that most of them, when they start hearing the truth, they're almost afraid of acknowledging its repercussions because they've already built so much. And not just like not just actually physically when it comes to their wealth and their homes and their mortgages and all that stuff, but even just like moral decisions that they may or may not have made based on the assumption that the lie was true. And so it becomes this big, like, heart-wrenching thing to acknowledge. And so a lot of them, though they're more capable of self-governance, usually will like run as far away from this concept as possible. The younger generation, my generation, has a little bit of an easier time understanding it when we see it. It's like, oh, that makes sense, and we're super supportive of it, and we're like, oh, that just answers so many questions, it checks so many boxes, but I don't know what to do. They just sit there and they twiddle their thumbs, right? Or they'll ask somebody else to do it for them. I've had so many of my friends I've talked to be like, oh yes, I'm right there, it makes so much sense, everything you're saying. Okay, great, let's do it. And then they wait for me to hold their hand or to give them a public school styled education on how to do it, versus the just assumption that you need to self-govern. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that generational gap and see how we can kind of help each other a little bit. The older generation can show the younger generation how to self-govern a little bit more, and the younger generation can help the older generation kind of accept the fact that a lot of our current society is built on a lie that really needs to be dismantled.
And dismantle, I think, is another thing that people they're really confusing that, because it seems like they're looking at it more like some type of a corporate takeover, or another power move. Everything turns into some type of power move or a takeover, or something of that nature, when actually what we need is for everyone to come together. And when we're discussing like the Reconstruction, for example, then it's only a reconstruction, because as it is bound, it must be unbound. So there's a portion of it that we're reconstructing, maybe identically to what is required. Okay, only enough to get to kind of pull the thread, get that thread completely unraveled, and then we can find a point of creation, and we can create the future, because we're not interested in reconstructing the past. And I mean, we really are interested in reconstructing some foundation for the future. But, you know, right now there's other things that are happening. You know, the earth has gone through an evolution, and it is a time of energy that is being elevated. Frequencies are rising, and so it's kind of a culmination of many things that are happening in this moment in time. And it's a lot to kind of sort out. And so I think it's the first time in most of our, what we could call man's history, civilized man, because, you know, they've rewritten it and they've only presented us with a limited amount of that, which is limited to the last 100 or maybe 150 years. And when actually we've been working on this for thousands of years to get to this moment.
Yeah, when you use the word unravel, I like that. The idea is mostly we need to unravel the lie basically that has been in everybody's heads, because as soon as people recognize the truth, then self-governance suddenly becomes super possible. Most of the negative things that we see in our society right now are only surviving because of how many men and women are actually actively feeding it because of their lack of self-governance. They don't, most people, I've been shocked at how many people have to ask if something's like legal or lawful, or like, well, can I do that? It's like, well, if you can't, if there's nothing saying you can't, why can't you do it? Like, go do it. And people don't realize that law in and of itself is ultimately just there to protect people and their assets. So as long as you're doing nobody harm, there's no injured party, there's no criminal act. And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, is so much of our lives have been built upon this idea of I guess what the opposite of self-governance, what would you call that?
Well, it's what they
That
want
people
is
governing you.
what they want is what. Look, a long time ago, Anna said that a man was asked, "Do you want God as your king or you want man as your king?" Well, this dumb dumb chose man. Okay, and we've been paying for it ever since. That's really what's going on. And so, you know, it wasn't our choice. We don't know why, but at this point, you know, it's kind of cool because we kind of have a moment where we get to answer the question again, try again. It's like the universal moment of truth where you get to boop, try again, you know,
One of
and
those, no, you're totally right. One of the things that made me think of just now is I've had a lot of people quote me the Jesus quote when he talks, his disciples come to him and say, is it lawful to pay taxes? And he grabs the coin and he says, well, whose image is this? Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. And I've had a lot of people tell me what that means is that we need to be subject to Caesar. But the interesting thing is the scriptures say, what is in the image of God? I was like, well, we are made in the image of God. So render unto God that which is God's. Us, our free will, our safety, our lives, our love, like all of the things that make us up need to be rendered to God first and foremost. It's the things of commerce that need to be kept in the realm of commerce. And people confuse that, and they try to take that and they twist it to mean the opposite of what it actually means. When we were, and this is actually, I think, maybe a good segue to what you and I were talking about earlier. We were going over how, because of how much our society has this inverted view of what is important, an inverted view of how to self-govern, it has created a situation where the de facto is effectively dismantling, breaking down the family unit. And we kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, talk about in
yes,
what way is the family unit being attacked and in what way can we do something about it.
Yes, 100%. I mean, everything that we're doing right now is what my mission has been from the beginning, is to save the babies, you know, and um, they are attacking the family from, well, they've been doing it for a long time. First, they thought, okay, well, we just got to get the man out of the house. That's what they thought. Oh, well, that didn't work. Okay. Maybe we get the man and the woman out of the house because she's more dangerous than we thought, you know. And now they're just like, oh shoot. No, the kids are capable of figuring it out and growing up and being good people anyway. Oh no. So now what they want is they want to just make it so that it's impossible for anyone to be a man or a woman because we're ungovernable as we are right now. And so the only way to make us the permanent slaves that they wish to make us, they have to completely destroy living man and living woman, because that is what is written in the law.
It's interesting. People don't realize this. We have a hypersexualized, or sorry, a hypersexualized too, but man, the word I'm trying to use is when something becomes secularized society, to the point that we view everything through a very scientific light. And a lot of people don't recognize the roots and the religious roots that are behind a lot of these messed up things that are happening. For instance, here's just an example of this. There's a couple books that I've read about this, but there is this one concept of a lot of the old pagan gods. There was specific sacrifices that they had to do to specific pagan gods during the era of paganism. And one of those sacrifices was the actual sacrifice of children, right? They would kill their babies at an altar. And usually the pagan deity that they were sacrificing it to was like the god of prosperity, where what they would do is they would sacrifice this child, and then they would expect that that god would bless them and prosper them economically. And obviously this is like a very sick, cultish, terrible thing to be done. But people don't realize, like, when you think about abortion and the reasons people tend to get abortions, it's literally because, what is the excuse? Oh, I can't provide for it myself. Or, oh, if I don't have this child, I'm going to be able to have a better economic life. And so even though they're not doing it in this ritualistic religious manner, they're literally killing their child for the same reason that the ancient cults did. And so they don't
Victimhood
realize that.
mentality, lack mindset, worshiping the money, because you cannot love yourself and love the money. You can't. You can't honor that's why we say you have to figure out what you want and why you want it.
Yeah.
What do you want and why do you want? Then you have to be honest, Hudson. Okay. And this is the bigger issue, is there is a false belief. And, I'm sorry, I'm going to, a lot of people are not going to like me saying this. Religion is 1,000,000% corporate. It is corporate. It is all of them, not just one, all of them. And they're all man-made corporate ideas. And they've put judgment. Basically, they use judgment to shame and blame, right? And then that is why people feel like they have to, like, it's justified for them to go get an abortion, right? Because you wouldn't do that, because it's just love. Why would you do that? Why would you destroy love at the core of the thing? I mean, well, I guess we could get into, how did that happen? Some young lady, some young woman or some young man, they were in a situation where, they don't even know what love is. Maybe they're not being loved. Maybe they're not being guided, whatever. There's so many of these situations that are going on right now. And so then there's all this shame behind whatever happened there. It comes 25 million different ways, right? But anyone who's closer to nature, it's probably in a situation that would stand the test of time, right? But if they're in another situation, some of these artificial situations, which is what you find in a city, then, it's just like when you hold a whale captive, who knows how they're going to behave. And that's what happens when people are in cities. They're captive, they're caged in these boxes, and they're having to live up to some unnatural expectation because they're not radically self reliant anymore. Because if they were self reliant, then we would know that we're abundant, that having a baby is a blessing. It's not something to, you know, fear or run away from or feel any shame or blame or anything. These are all societal things amongst these societies that are civilized.
Well, and it's interesting because the societies that you're talking about, they're obviously built on the roots of a lot of paganism. And so, um, just kind of going off that a little bit, but same concept. I
Mhm.
forgot which pagan god it was, but it's the one that is like half goat, half man, but it's also like half man, half woman. And it's like, I think it's Baal. It might be Baal.
Mhm.
Um, but but the interesting thing about it is in the ancient pagan culture, the whole goal was to erase gender. And once gender was erased, erase the family unit. Um, and so this is actually one of the interesting things, going back a little bit on what you were saying about how, to be in harmony with nature, you need to recognize the purpose of life, the purpose of, the intimacy and the purpose of the genders and all of that. So one of the things that we talked about earlier is that we could discuss this on call a little bit, is one of the agendas that has been used to attack and destroy the family unit. And obviously the end goal being to erase gender, erase the family and all those things, even though the family is obviously the fundamental unit of society. Um, the evil agenda would be to destroy society. Not maybe society is not the right word, to destroy all people. Um, but just diving into it real quick. So this is one of the things I've talked to a lot of my friends about. We'll talk about the different things that we see in the world and how weird it is and how things come about. And I was able to make this discovery once. When I was a little bit younger, and thankfully to some of the things that my dad helped teach me, um, and a couple books I was reading too. But it's this concept that there is the bad version of feminism, and then there's the good version of feminism, right? The good version, and the original meaning of the word, is to be feminine, right? So the celebration of women being feminine. But obviously that has been hijacked to this really inverse version of feminism that suggests um, that women should be as masculine as men, and that men should not be masculine, but that they should be pushed down into a form of feminism that is not natural to them, or a form of femininity. And so what you end up having is you end up having masculine men, sorry, you end up having masculine women, and you end up having feminine men. And we see this obviously in a lot of Hollywood. Everybody sees it in movies. It's not like that crazy new of a concept to see that, men are, if they're a good guy in a movie, they're probably the dumb guy. If they're a bad guy, or if they're smart, they're probably a bad guy. Any particular masculine trait isn't really celebrated. And then also how women just have to man up and be like men. I'm going to pause right there. Any thoughts about that before I move on?
Well, you're talking about the emasculation of both of the genders. And so let's go back to how are we established and created. Like, we have a masculine and a feminine side of our brain. Okay. And so the left hemisphere of the brain is the masculine side of the brain, and the right hemisphere of the brain is the feminine side of the brain. And what they want is to make everyone, left or right brain dominant. Okay. And if you're left brain dominant, then you could end up as a narcissist. Okay. And if you're right brain dominant, then you're just, naive, and, you literally are submissive, but in an extreme, in a bad way. When actually, in fact, we're supposed to be holistic minded. You're supposed to develop both sides. It's not that you should one side, dominant sounds really good and positive, but actually you want something balanced. And that is when we operate in our highest moral, self. And because the masculine side of the brain is the more analytical side, but the feminine side is the one that's pattern recognition, and it's the generative side. You need the full intelligence. So the masculine side is the intel, the feminine side is the genere, the gens side, and together it is intelligence. And so they're dumbing everyone down by emasculating them and pushing them all into a situation where the women can't admire and respect the men, as you say. And the men also, they're doing everything to try to cater to these women to the degree of, they're not allowed to just be men, which men are the enforcers. And so they are supposed to be the protectors. And so
Yeah.
they're trying to do all the things like the women, which is, multitasking, which is ridiculous. That's what the women do, and then the women are trying to be the enforcers. That doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't work either.
It makes me think of one of my favorite symbols is the yin and yang, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have the classic signals, black and white, and it's spinning around each other. But within the black, there's a little bit of white, and within the white, there's a little bit of black. And I think that's men and women too. Obviously, like you said, you're right brain, left brain. It's built to balance. It's built to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So going along the train of thought a little bit more, where I was headed with this was, if you create a version of feminism that tries to make men act like women and women act like men, even if you have, let's say you have a straight couple that get married, monogamous relationship, and they have children, they raise sons and daughters, the sons are going to look at their overly masculine mother, and they're going to be slightly confused. And they're going to look at their overly feminine father, and they're going to be slightly confused. And it's interesting because when it comes to sexual attraction or what you're attracted to in general, it's something that starts, it's biological. It exists on the DNA level, obviously your chromosomes and everything. But it's not just genitalia. It's not just like, oh, as long as they look like and are shaped like a woman, then suddenly you're attracted. It's like, no, you're actually attracted as a man. You're attracted to feminine traits, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, all of those things, not just physically.
Again,
The reverse
it's
can be
just a whole package, right? Sorry.
exactly. It's the whole package.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the reverse can be said about women too.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interesting thing here is when you take a woman and obviously she's still physically a woman, but you make it so that she's emotionally and psychologically like a man, and you do the same thing to men where they're now emotionally and psychologically like women, and then they raise children together. What happens is those children grow up with a version of that they have a cognitive dissonance where what they end up being attracted to is the opposite of what they're naturally designed to be attracted to. And so you'll have a son that's being raised up with a feminine father, and he'll somehow be a little bit attracted to men because of it. And then you have a rise of homosexuality in a society. After that, after they get to the rise in homosexuality, the easiest next push is to transgenderism, obviously, because as soon as there is a disconnect between what attraction and what it's naturally designed to be on the biological level, then you get to where people are actually trying to change their genders. And when you do that, it breaks down the family unit quicker than anything else. And it comes to the realization of the ancient pagan idea of Baal and the half man, half woman God, and trying to make society like that. The only reason you exist is because
you're here to
feminine
procreate
and masculine, to procreate, of
You're
people
just
that
the only
follow the proper path of
yeah.
procreation.
Our only mission is to procreate. Okay, friends, that is our only mission. So to all the points that you just made, if I may.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, I went on a long tangent there.
No, it's good. So unnatural attraction, you say, that leads to all failures. Like all of them believe they're failures. They don't believe they can get anywhere. They can't win, or they can't find someone who isn't a failure. You know what I mean? Like they can't win for losing. And then they're never satisfied. There's a constant disappointment, or there's always somebody disappointed. There's always someone trying to compensate. There's always someone trying to explain and defend. It's completely unnatural, okay? Like we should not be explaining and defending, okay? Just like depression is not an emotion, friends. Anxiety is not an emotion. These are mental illnesses, okay? And so all of these things, and then it gets into a lack of life. And like you said, the cognitive dissonance, this is being done as a psychological operation on purpose, friends, because the way that they create cognitive dissonance is by creating a danger option and then a safe option, because we will naturally avoid danger. Our body, our like the way that the mind works is we're not going to try to do anything based on even really success or failure. We're going to do things based on avoiding danger. That's it. So if the options are dangerous or, safe, then people are going to, you know, choose safe, especially if they fall for this cognitive dissonance all the time. Notice even right now, I mean, there's nothing more annoying to me than when someone goes, "Oh, be safe, safe travels." I'm like, "Nah, I'll be dangerous and I'm going to come back home." Okay. It's like, I'm not going to be safe. I'm going to be dangerous because dangerous people are formidable, right? I don't even tell my own progeny that. I don't say, "Oh, be safe." I'm like, "Y'all be dangerous and get home." You know, like, you know,
Mhm.
be dangerous, get home, do whatever you got to do, get back. But
Can I can I actually walk down a
yes,
train of thought?
yeah.
Um, this is really interesting, and it'll loop back. Um, I remember thinking I had a long conversation with some friends on this about what life is and what
Mm,
life isn't. And what was interesting was we realized after a while that there's nothing that's alive that doesn't have a form of free will, and there's nothing that has a form of free will that isn't also alive. Um, and we started diving into this a little bit, and one of the things I realized was if you were looking at the universe as a fly on the wall, you just got to like get a watch. You're not part of it, which is technically not possible because the fact that you would exist and be watching means you're also part of the universe. But in theory, if you could really just watch and be completely foreign to the idea of existence and you were looking at it and you were watching it, you would realize pretty quickly that there's two types of things you can witness. Things that act only when acted upon, meaning things that will be pushed, like, say, a rock. It's going to stay still unless something acts upon it, versus things that act in a way that are seemingly determined internally, meaning you can't predict from an external perspective what it's going to do.
mm,
And what you'd recognize is you recognize that the difference between what you classify as alive and what you classify as dead is the things that are alive move in a way that cannot be externally predicted. Okay, so looping it back,
mm,
when you realize that free will and the
mm,
ability to choose, the ability to act, is the fundamental reality of life, whenever something that is alive is being reduced to the level of an inanimate object by something else exercising control over it, you're actually reducing something that is alive to something that is dead. So when you take somebody that's alive, a man or a woman, and you try to exercise laws upon them in a way that takes away their fundamental free will, that makes it so that they can't act in a way that is determined internally, and instead it's determined by you externally, you are actually removing from them life. You're actually helping kill them. Because again, the fundamental principle of what life is the fact that living things can move and act and do in a way that cannot be externally predicted or chosen because it's determined internally. Does that make sense? So going back to your danger conversation, if you're trying to only act in ways that the world or any external force dictates, or what you would consider safe or whatever, then you're literally not living. Whereas if you make your own decisions internally, regardless of what an external force may say, then you're literally living according to all the laws of nature and the universe. Does that make sense?
no, it was really good. I also, okay, 2 points. Along with what you said about living, It might not be that it moves in the way that you think, but it contributes into the balance in your ability to move. For example, plants are alive and they provide oxygen, but they also provide carbon dioxide, and they also provide nitrogen in different times in different ways as required, based on light and other things, other factors. And those affect your ability to move and function. So just,
Well, and
all of
going,
that needs to be in balance. But this brings up the point of universal principles versus man's laws. What do you think?
yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that ultimately the concept of law is that something can do something with a predictable outcome, right? If X happens, Y will happen. It's cause and effect. And man can create temporary cause and effects. If you do this, we'll punish you with this,
Well,
But
or look, I guess what I mean is principles are governed naturally by the universe.
yes, natural
Laws,
law.
right? Laws are governed by man, enforced by man. They must be enforced. And so the reason that laws are evil or can be evil is because if it should just be done, then it doesn't require enforcement. If it's good, if it's for the good of the people, then it requires no enforcement. People should just be willing to do it.
It's interesting because the only premise for law to exist in the first place is the value of life, because
You
the
mean the
whole
value
concept.
of time. So it's the value of time. So what they did, Hudson, is they created this concept, this metric of time, which is not real. Okay. They created it and they only need it to measure your blood money, your sweat equity. Otherwise, what do we need it for?
I have to think about that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
The thought I was having, I think we were maybe thinking about two different things. I was thinking about the concept of law, or the excuse that law only needs to exist is to protect people and their assets, right? And that's because of a fundamental value of life. And natural principles would say, oh, because you value your life and because you're not a hypocrite, presumably, you would not do harm to anything else that is alive. And so the natural principle is that do no harm, obviously the highest level of heaven, the highest law of heaven.
But you only
If you,
need the other law
because
because,
people break that.
well, because man chose man to be their king instead of God to be their king. Think about it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So if you unbind that one thing and then choose God as your king, then you don't need to go back to all the crap and the lies. But are the people available, capable, ready to transition into that? When people start talking about this other funny word, trust, they're so busy being caught up on documented trust law, they don't know how to trust each other.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have to think a little bit more about the time thing, because I agree that time is not linear. Truly, this moment is the only moment that ever exists. And fortunately, it will always exist. And so you don't need to worry about it. Time is not linear. But in the universe, there are patterns in like the solar system and the movement of the planets. We have day,
Well,
there's
nobody's
day and
saying
night
there's not cycles, okay?
cycles. Yeah. Okay. Can you
Having
break that down?
having having natural cycles, okay? There are cycles in life. There's a balance in the ecosystem which operates on a cycle. But if you interfere with a cycle, then you create dis-ease. Okay. So you can't interfere with it. Just like when you interfere with free will choice of a man, look at the dis-ease of putting a man in a box. Like you put a man in prison, you put a man in a cage, and what kind of dis-ease is created as a side effect of boxing up the one free will of 30 trillion watts? That's a lot of freaking evil, okay?
That's interesting. So yeah. So then this would be going back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier. If free will manifests itself
Mm-hmm.
in any degree, doing harm would be interfering with free will
Right.
at all.
And
Which,
so why? Everybody knows that that's not to
but
be
now
done.
here's the interesting thing though, because the de facto will tell you that if we say this and you're like, oh, so you're libertarian, meaning like, and then it's like, hold up, no.
That's a
Because
that's a
what they don't say
politician.
is if you let free will happen, people will commit crime. It's like, well, no. What is crime? Crime is trespassing against free will. So yes, ultimately free will is what's defended and allowed. But if somebody trespasses against another's free will, then obviously they would need to be stopped. They surrendered their free will when they decided to try to trespass against someone else's free will.
Okay,
Hence
but
law at all.
law enforcement officers only believe that nonsense because that's part of their training. Their training is we are the only good ones and everybody else is who we're at war with. And that's the problem. Okay? So when we're all kids in a sandbox, and if we just operate like the kids in the sandbox, we're never going to not love and care about each other. If there was no grown-ups around to corrupt us and interfere with us, that new batch of babies would be pure love. There would be no reason for them to think any other kind of way because they wouldn't have that experience of evilnomics that we've all experienced. But we can, if we want to, we can make a quantum leap mentally and just reset if we want. We can choose love, okay? And this is what Anna is saying. Stop lying, choose love. Stop. Look, if you read this book that she told everybody to read and you start practicing it, that's what you're going to do. I'm going to just keep talking about this all the time now. Everybody's going to get sick of it because everybody wants to study the common law. Everybody wants to know, well, there is no freaking common law for you to read in a book. You have to go exercise it. That requires courage. Most of you are too scared to get up off the sofa or do anything besides complain on your keyboard about when is the bank going to open up because you can't do nothing until the bank opens up. Well, I've been doing things all day long. And I'm doing things all the time. And I'm out there exercising things. You see that on Idaho. You see some of these people out there, they're just running their business. They're just doing their thing. They're operating in trade. They are living a life. And they are doing it like free men. Okay? And that's exercising the common law. You can't make it there's no book to study because there hasn't been any common law practiced in over 150 years because people have been liars. They've been professional political liars. They've been trained by the corporatocracy to lie. Because, they're religious and they're polite and they're kind. Right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It makes me think of shoot. I just lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, Nita.
There's no rush here.
No, I really like where this call has gone and everything. I think that ultimately a lot of people, when they're thinking about self-governance, they expect other people to do it for them, or they expect, somehow, some way the governance to just happen. Like you said, like you mentioned just now, a lot of people are just waiting for the funding to hit so that they can live their best life or do their thing. But ultimately that funding will come and it'll disappear in a blink. if people don't know how to self-govern and make sure that we're setting up American common law the way it needs to be. Makes me think of our founding fathers. Our founding fathers legitimately did their best at setting up America under natural law, meaning if it's natural, if you have the natural ability to do it, there's no law against it. Speaking, traveling, trading, like all the things, if you have the ability to do it, you should be able to do it. And that's ultimately what the highest law is. The highest law of heaven is the do no harm, because if you do no harm, you naturally follow all common law.
Well, the only way that they're able to fear anyone into believing that people won't behave that way is because it's just talk. Talk is cheap. But you know what? That's just like the fear of arms. If you've never held a gun, if you've never fired a gun, you don't respect a gun. Anybody who has fired one isn't going to easily feel like they're just going to go shoot somebody. They're going to do everything never to use their arm. The only person who's going to go try to think that they're going to use an arm, like half cocked or whatever, is someone who's never used one.
It's interesting. I had a friend say this once, and it's actually come about in a couple different podcasts online within the last few years. But the idea that being harmless is not being peaceful. Mm-hmm. You're just harmless. You have to be capable of violence to be able to be peaceful.
100%. You have to know your full power and have been able to exercise it, not to take someone out, but to just know, like I say, if you've had TAC training and you know what it's like, you are not going to resort to that. That's not what you're never going to want to resort to that. Your goal is never to draw your arm. But dangerous people are formidable, and dangerous people are patient. Dangerous people are kind. Dangerous people are going to give the other man every opportunity to course correct. They want them to course correct because they don't want to do the harm.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's one of the things is like if you labor under the belief that you're harmless, it's a lie, and so you're actually more likely to harm.
Yeah.
Than acknowledging the truth that you are dangerous and that you are capable of violence, and then in that decision make a peaceful decision.
Well, the tell lie vision convinces people that this is how they're going to react in any given situation. And that's how they program them into the cognitive dissonance by demonstrating visually for them, by acting out all these lies and bullshit. Okay. And when they do that, then people believe it because that's how our mind works. It's mentalism. This is going back to another Hermetic principle. And so then people are made to believe that this is how people would behave. But in truth, I don't think I've ever met a man who is excited and ready to try to cause the greatest harm. Most warriors, most people who have been at war, who have been places and done things, they are not interested in that. They know that's the last thing that they want to do. They know it. They know that's the last thing that they want to do. And you have to be like Genghis Khan level of evil, which, I'm sorry, Hudson, that's exhausting. Okay. I don't know know how, have you ever been really angry?
I can tell a story if you want me to.
Yes. Tell a story.
When I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, I could have been 12. My brother and I got in a fight and we were mad and we were like trying to beat the crap out of each other. And we were outside and I grabbed a handful of rocks, and some of them were kind of bigger rocks, and I chucked them at him and I missed. I'm so grateful I missed. But instantly I realized that if I had hit him with one of those rocks that was relatively large, I could have seriously injured him. Technically, I could have accidentally killed him. Now, he's my older brother. We beat each other up all the time. But I had never, after that moment, reacted out of pure, and again, I was a juvenile. I was 12, I had reacted out of anger in a way that made me want to harm somebody, someone I loved, my brother, and then instantly I felt complete horror over the fact that I had acted on anger like that. And I remember it sent me into a lot of as a 12-year-old, it sent me into a lot of thought about how I don't want to harm anyone. I really don't. Like that, it's terrible that I had that emotion. And again, this is coming from a juvenile who hadn't really developed his emotions, learned how to handle his emotions or control himself yet. But I haven't since then ever even gotten close to wanting to harm someone out of anger. I realized at that point that the scriptures call it a form of possession, but it's really it's this really screwed up principle in the head that if not acknowledged that it's capable and that it's dangerous and that it's terrible, could come out at a terrible moment, and then you could actually do someone harm, which is why you have to, like you said, you have to shoot a gun. You have to know how much harm it can be. You need to acknowledge how, like, you could actually cause someone harm, and only in that acknowledgement are you capable to be humble enough to recognize how horrific it is, to recognize how far away you want to be from ever doing that. So luckily, I didn't actually hit my brother with the rocks, but it taught me a valuable lesson about how anger is not something that's worth having to the point that you'd want to harm someone.
Yeah. Anybody who has had any experience with that, I think, can testify. There are plenty of living men and women I know that can testify to the fact that, the only people to worry about in that regard are the ones who have actually done nothing, not had any of that experience. But anyone who has had that, like, fit, like you had a little hissy fit or whatever, you can really scare yourself. I think, that was the benefit of us being able to be outside and play outside and work things out amongst ourselves as young people, and the fact that they don't want young people right now to even do that, that means they don't even want them to know their own power. That's more dangerous than anything. And that's part of the other cognitive dissonance, this fake world where people are in school, where they aren't able to actually express themselves fully to see how that actually even feels or plays out. Doing some of that stuff on social doesn't give you an immediate feedback. It isn't real.
Yeah. It makes me think of my nieces and nephews. We always go over to my father and mother's on Sundays, and we hang out as a family. And the other week, we're hanging out, and I have a niece and a nephew who were throwing a frisbee, and one of them chucked it way too close to the other one and hit him in the eye. And it's like instantly, ouch. And then it's like they also like dig holes. We have like little shovels and stuff for them to do. It's like all this stuff that they can hurt themselves with. Right. But if they don't know that, like he started bawling, his eye got black and everything, and she felt terrible. But it's like important for them to discover, oh, I can't chuck a heavy piece of plastic frisbee at someone's face because that hurts, and they have to recognize that. They have to be able to be in the actual natural environment, and that's not just to say with physical things. Right. The natural environment of us to be able to go out and learn how to self-govern in law, with our friends, with our family, to know how to trade, and not think that we have to have a government to protect us from making harmful trade decisions. Like all of those things.
Liability, Hudson. Liability.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. It's the opposite of responsibility, friends. Like you want to have responsibility. When they say, okay, well, you can be held liable. You mean I can be responsible? Oh, great. I will do that. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Niti, I do got to get going. I'm sure you want to wrap this up. But
yeah. I know we're on a tight hour. Thank you so much for helping do this in the middle of your workday. You guys, we're going to be bringing more conversations like this, and we're going to be breaking down self-governance and what are our what is society facing, and we're going to be bringing it to you from the perspective of, two generations trying to bring it together so that we can all work better. Because I really love the way that, I don't know if you said it exactly this way. I might just be making up some words for you, Hudson, but you said something to the effect of, you have the older experience and you have the younger experience, but when you put them together, now you have a much more superior experience that you can follow. And why wouldn't we leverage all of that wisdom, from the young and the old together, and just pushing each other a little bit in these talks? Like, I want to see what you think about this whole time thing. I can't wait to see how that like turns out, and some of the things that you're saying as well. I'm going to be listening back, because I usually I feel like I'm going to listen back, and then I'm going to go like, oh my God, look at what he said,
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much, you guys. I think Hudson and I are going to try to do this every other week, and I'm going to have Jamie with me every other week. We're going to be going over health and wellness, like natural, holistic health, because I think these are really important conversations, and we want to get men and women back. When we're saying we're calling on men, that doesn't mean we're not calling the women, but we want everyone to come in their true form, with their holistic self. And I mean, can we all decide? I think we can make a mental decision to make that quantum leap and try to find the ancient path that we were originally put on. I think we have the ability to do that. What do you think?
I agree.
All right, guys. We'll see you, Hudson, in 2 weeks then.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Thanks, everybody.